Hello, everybody. This is your weather woman, meteorologist Amy Metz. Here is my Facebook page we're looking at. That is a flood that happened with Tropical Cyclone Cody, which is long gone now. For some reason, I'm not seeing my posts here. That's unusual. I wanted to start on this Facebook page to show you what I'll be talking about today, and it's just not here home. Maybe, let's see. Here we go. I have on the schedule here to talk about the tropical developments going on between Vanuatu and Solomon Islands. I've been forecasting here going live, just barely briefly touching on the fact that there is a batch of thunderstorms moving back and forth between these islands. And now it does appear as though there could very well be some cyclonic development going on there. I would like to point out that space weather can play a role in this sort of intensification of storms, giving us extra reason to have clouds called cloud condensation nuclei. If this type of plasma comes toward Earth, this one I believe is not coming toward us. However, we did have a proton event with a previous solar storm that I shared about and some M-class flares. These particularly I've noticed can increase lightning, and the proton events will cause aurora. But like I was saying with that cloud condensation nuclei, that's the bigger one when it comes to cyclones, because what we're looking at here, where it's red, the deep dark red's almost kind of black, those are areas of more intense, larger drops of water, and that just tells us that there's thunderstorms in that area, whereas some of the stuff going on up in the northern hemisphere right now during its winter is a little less convective, less, it's not thunderstorms, it's going to be more rain, whereas these red bits here are very likely thunderstorms as well. And so these types of solar storms that I just showed you can increase the amount of the storms on Earth. They were not massive space weather events. They were just strong enough to help a little bit increase what may have been coming. And so I want to be clear here that at 26.5 degrees Celsius, right around this orange color here, is where we finally get to the point where we can have cyclonic development. So here's Fiji, circling it with the mouse. Vanuatu and Solomon Islands, I'm circling here, is where that batch of thunderstorms is. So I always look at these three factors for cyclonic development. Is the water warm enough? Yes, it's above that orange color. Is there wind shear? And that's also going to be a role with is there moisture? So we saw the moisture, we saw the warm temperatures. Now we see to invest here on this global weather information page that I love. I love all of the extra details and data here. So I've already gone ahead and opened some things for the Southeast Pacific, and its wind shear is the big one I didn't show yet, that will allow cyclonic development and sometimes kill it. I'll start with this one actually just because it shows on the bottom here what it means. So in green is favorable for cyclonic formation, yellow's neutral, red unfavorable. The reason for this is just that there's not a lot of winds at different levels in the atmosphere from top to or let's say from the bottom of the sea level here, all the way up through the top of the sky. If you're seeing greens, that means winds are basically going in the same direction. They're not changing speed or direction very much from the seafloor here up through the tops of the atmosphere. That will allow, if a batch of thunderstorms wants to start circulating, it makes it easier for it to do so. And a friendly reminder here for those who aren't familiar, instead of this northern hemisphere spinning our cyclones counterclockwise, here they'll be clockwise. So we'll be looking at the chance for that with this storm. And so this shear tendency here, I got a video loop playing here to show you that it's not changing. In fact, we're seeing greens over that area where the batch of thunderstorms is, telling us that it is very likely that there's nothing to disrupt the cyclonic formation. So with all those other factors in play, it could happen. Now it would be a matter of how strong is that going to be. Right now, the GFS model, I'll go ahead and be very clear that out this far, what we're looking at now is 3.5 days ahead from now. I would not rely on these I wouldn't strictly rely on it. Although when they're in agreement here, we have the European model now showing it in the same area, and icon is quite a bit different, but that's a little bit newer of a model. So I do agree pretty well with what's going on here, and more so with the European, that I don't think it'll be quite as strong as the GFS is showing, which with these purples here, I'll zoom in a little closer, would mean that there would be wind speeds in there almost about 100 kilometers per hour on this sort of almost purple to blue color. But then over land, we're not seeing as strong of winds. So I don't believe Fiji's going to have a problem with the storm. There will probably be some rough seas, of course, near Vanuatu and New Caledonia during this week. And so for me to move forward here, I'm going to look at what we call steering winds. I'll go to the data selection, which would be right now, and where I am in the United States, it is Tuesday night, but it's going to be Wednesday in the South Pacific, just to be clear. So moving up to the steering wind, which is about 500 or 600 millibars halfway up through the sky, you'll see that there are wind directions here, all these little lines. And if they're longer, that means they're stronger and faster. And the direction is also showing us where it's moving. So this steering wind pattern tells us that it will want to move. Any storm that may form here would want to move to the south. This is why I'm saying it should not be a big problem for Fiji. Because there's this large high pressure here in the mid-levels, and also air at the surface level pushing this the opposite direction, it will help force any cyclonic development away. And the next big factor would be the jet level. This is higher up in the sky, and it can also play a big role in where these storms will go. So when we have a ridge, this upward almost N shape, or else a trough, this U shape, then it kind of helps me understand as a meteorologist where things will go, where they might intensify. So there is a storm that should intensify to the southwest of all the other storms going on, but not affecting land. Now with this one and this ridge here, as it's playing out, I do agree pretty far ahead with this jet level pattern that there will be a slow movement of this stronger wind. And again, so you know, the stronger winds are in the middle. These whites are over 100 kilometers per hour, closer to 120, and kind of go up to 150. But this is high in the sky, so that's normal. And what that means is that it forces a lot of air in different places. And so as we move through the days, you'll notice that some of that does get over top of New Caledonia, and it doesn't quite affect Vanuatu. This will be another factor telling me that any kind of development that may occur here will definitely want to be spinning this way and move along with this ridge. It will most likely get bumped out, pushed to the south and to the west as this ridge continues moving east. Now, this here would be a another system that is not going to be dangerous. There's not going to be rainfall around the middle sections of these, but it can play a role on pushing out storms. So that's good news if you ask me that this storm would want to go this way. I believe it could be fairly similar to Cody's path, however, not starting out so close to Fiji. So that worst of the winds and the rains would, here they are now developing on the model, being away from the islands. And I would agree with that. Right now, we could have a cyclonic development if there wasn't that land there, because the batch of thunderstorms that's there right now has been kind of pushing back and forth from Vanuatu to Solomon Islands for a few days. I've been watching it. It's been on my watch list. But the good news about that, it's next to those islands. And so it's hard for the air to be able to spin in the same circle all the way up, down by the surface, because it's going to be pushing into buildings, it'll be pushing into mountains, and that disrupts that tight cyclonic flow that is necessary for a strong cyclone. So if we do see a cyclone, I believe it will end up being closer to this area here, similar to what the model is showing, and not for days to come. I have been kind of watching this area. It would be the batch of thunderstorms here, 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 that could likely spin up as we get a tropical wave from that jet pattern I was showing. So you can see evidence of that jet pattern here. I'll go back and show you what I mean for right now. Into Vanuatu, we see that there's air moving this way high in the sky. And being a trained meteorologist, I already know that these wispy sort of looking clouds, those are high level cirrus clouds made up of ice crystals rather than the intense large water droplets that we get where we see the red. So that's one more reason that as this ridge gets closer and closer to this batch of thunderstorms, it can kind of push and pull on it a little bit as it moves, and that can create a spin amongst these thunderstorms. So, excuse me, this is not necessarily going to be a strong cyclone. And I want to be clear because cyclones can mean different things throughout different parts of the world. And I'll just play this model out for you while I talk about this next part on the wind gusts, because the wind gust on this European model is usually more accurate. Now, placement, I would not 100% agree with, but wind speeds, I think, are pretty accurate right here. And so here it goes, coming together. If you have any questions, by the way, go ahead and put them in the comments. And also on my Facebook page, I'll be heading there in just a moment to see if there are questions. I did not mention that this time, and so I'm not sure if there are. Usually in my first Facebook post to let people know I'll be going live, I say, hey, put your questions here, and then I'll answer them in my live stream. So as you can see, some of this, what I was talking about with the land interaction, this wind coming into here cannot allow the cyclone to form. Cyclones around the world are just a cut off, a low. All the way down at the surface, there's a closed circulation, that these winds are going in a full circle. Now, the wind speed thresholds for a tropical storm, tropical depression, that can vary. And so I don't focus too much on that because really the worst of the worst with these storms, it can always be different. It's like how much moisture is there? Is it going to be flooding a lot? Is there going to be a high storm surge? Is this going to be the top end, high end cyclone? So those are more so the things I focus on rather than the little bits of differences between each country's interpretation of the different thresholds and levels of categories. We call them category hurricanes, in America. And so because all of this is going over land, I don't believe it will be that strong of a hurricane. Exterior cyclone, as you call them, and because the water temperatures decrease in their temperature as we get further down, wherever here's that graphic. So as we're going south on New Caledonia, you see that we go from that orange color that I said is the 26.5 degrees Celsius, allowing for cyclonic development, and then the yellows where it kind of cuts it off. So if a storm forms in this warm water, it can carry on its energy, continue to be a cyclone all the way down to New Zealand, but it does gradually decrease its intensity as it drops into these cooler waters. So without this thing being able to be over the open warm water, because it's hitting, all the wind is hitting this land over Vanuatu, it's keeping it a little bit less intense than it could be. I would not say that this is a big thing to worry about, but I definitely wanted to get on here and share this with you as I've been getting questions. So let's see, I know I get a lot of questions in my inbox, but I don't like to open personal messages during these live streams. So if you have questions that you want me to talk about in the live, please put them here in the comment section. So this, of course, people post models. That's what we just talked about. And like I said, they're not usually very accurate, although I do have a good feeling about this one. If the placement is different at all, I would kind of maybe think that maybe that it could be a little bit to the east for factors I talked about earlier. Bula Bula, Vinaka, for your kind words. Hi, look, time you don't. Maybe he had sent me messages and I missed them. I get a ton of messages, so please don't be upset if I don't get back to you. I have so much going on, jobs, kids, and I do love doing this as a passion. So he says that, no, he doesn't have the link for that graphic. I wondered where this graphic came from. It does look like something maybe that was derived from the Fiji Meteorological Service, and Whether or not they drew these lines is what I was curious about. But because it was not my product, I will be changing this graphic and replacing it with the link to this video, as I had mentioned up above in that post. So I wish everybody the best through this. I'll continue updates as far as wind speeds go because it looks like Saturday could be the closest call for land dwellers. I would advise people to stay off the seas over the weekend near Vanuatu and toward New Caledonia. And then by Sunday, this shows that the storm would be south of New Caledonia, but based on those upper level winds that I showed you, I don't believe that would be the case. Here's again right now and this ridge. So Vanuatu's here. We're going to be having what's called a ridge here. So I do think it might be a little bit more to the east. Nonetheless, not bothering people on land much. So just if you have some kind of work or fishing that you do out at sea, I would say be extremely cautious. And if you're around Vanuatu, especially on that eastern portion, I just wouldn't even go out over the weekend on the boat unless it's like a very large ship that you have, something that can handle kind of more turbulent seas. And so here I'm just going to go over a couple more little products just because they're here. And vorticity, you'll see where it's red is an area that could have more intense storms. But where we're seeing the storms forming and that cyclonic development perhaps being more probable, we don't see those colors. So that's one more reason why I have been saying this won't be the worst of the worst. It's great that it's not over land. So now I believe it's not highlighted. Yeah, this is the upper level divergence. So that is just moderate. That means that up high in the sky, the winds are moving away from each other. That makes way for air down below to rise up. Rising air usually cools and condenses and turns into clouds. If it's fast enough, it turns into thunderstorms. But at a 20 here, I would call that moderate. So it's not intense. And then when you couple that with lower level convergence, that's an added push from the bottom to fill in that upper divergence. It's also moderate, and even in this case, negative. So with a negative convergence at the bottom level, this is not a factor that's going to intensify this quickly. We don't have a lot of strong winds around it. Another great reason to say that it's not going to be intense. Upper level winds, also a little bit lower here. I can look at this stuff very fast and know it. So just to give you guys a little idea, these little flags here where you see a triangle attached to these lines, they're called wind barbs. That's going to be 50 knots or higher with the barb, with that flag style kind. And every little line is 10 knots. So here we have 40 knots, but then right around this area where the thunderstorms are developing, we are just having like 30, 20 knots. So it's not very strong. And again, another reason for that is because that land is there. It's pushing in and pushing back. That can change. Of course, it can cross over land very strong if it had the ability to form a big, a really strong cyclone before passing over, but that's not going to be the case with this. So shear tendency, this is one of the easier ones to look at because the color scheme is nice. But again, low values on the shear. Low values on shear means that it's favorable for cyclonic development. So this is the only factor along with the warm water temperatures showing us that there's a likelihood for it to form. We have the moisture, we have the warm water, but then there's all those other things I just talked about, a little more technical, that are kind of pushing against the fact that this will be strong. And even the model itself, I do feel good about the strength of it being accurate, although I think it may be a little bit more to start going a little more east at this point. So with 70 kilometer per hour winds, 80 kilometer per hour winds, maybe 100 on the gust side, you might not want to be out at sea that day. However, people over Vanuatu and in New Caledonia, I do believe will remain safe through the weekend. I don't believe this will get anywhere near Fiji to disrupt anybody's plans over there and continue moving south. So by this point, I would be more likely to believe that this storm would be about here and about the same intensity. So that's all I have for today. I can check the questions here if there's any. Don't see any. It's not the best time of day in this part of the world for me to be doing this live, but I hope everyone can catch it and enjoy what I had to say. So have a nice day, and thank you for watching. This is your weather woman, meteorologist Amy Metz. Don't forget to go like my Facebook page if you want to continue getting more updates with these graphics that I post. So this is a little bit more helpful, and there's my new job where I am filling in Sioux City, so I'll be on TV here, and that was a great news forecast that I shared. So go ahead and check these out. I'm trying to build custom hurricane resistant homes. I call them weatherproof homes around the world. So we haven't had cyclones in this area for a while, so I was trying to find you some work examples here of what I do for Fiji specifically, but it's been a minute. There we go. Here's one. So the last one that was around was that invest near the Cook Islands that ended up moving south. So I was able to tell people days ahead of time where this was going, and it's just easier for me when I'm busy and not able to do a whole live forecast to continue putting up graphics like this. So if this is what you'd like to see, please come over here and like this Weather Woman page on Facebook, and you can get these updates and communicate with me a little bit better. Put questions in the comment sections if you have them. Like this one, I did tell people to, so they did ask me a bunch of questions here. So have a great day and enjoy the weather while it lasts. I know it's super hot in Fiji, and so go for a swim and be happy it's not a cyclone